As the civil war continues, could forced conscription in Myanmar serve the military or work against it? A proud show for the annual Armed Forces Day masks the losses, defections, and growing resistance movements challenging the military's power. So will forced conscription help maintain the junta's grip or prove a step toward its demise? I'm Andrea Sanke, and today's newsmaker is Myanmar. Well, there may be fewer defections from Myanmar's military these days, but not because conscripts are feeling more patriotic. The junta, or Tatmadaw, is now forcing civilians to join its ranks, desperate to crush the citizen militia and rebel groups who've united against its rule. Meanwhile, the junta has said it will likely hold elections in 2025. But rather than being an exercise in democracy, most suspect it would only enforce one-party rule. Here's a look at the current state of Myanmar's military.
Myanmar's Armed Forces Day is celebrated annually on March the 27th. It commemorates the army's resistance to Japanese occupation in 1945 and is an opportunity to put on display the military's might. But this year's display is being overshadowed by multiple challenges, including having to fend off attacks from rebels, outdated weaponry, and dwindling military personnel. To bolster its numbers, the military will start recruiting civilians next month after activating a dormant enlistment law on February the 10th. It's caused thousands to flee.
Imagine if you are a Rohingya family with a young person or a young Rohingya man being forced to join the very military that is barraging your villages with these aerial attacks. The very military that committed genocide against your community, sending hundreds of thousands of Rohingya over the border into Bangladesh. I can't imagine anything as horrific as that kind of situation faced by the Rohingya.
Groups opposed to forced conscription have killed at least 10 junta administrators. The conscription applies to men between the ages of 18 and 35 and women between 18 and 27 for service of up to 2 years. Anyone attempting to evade it or help others flee could be jailed for up to 5 years.
In some places, the military has abducted individuals, while in others, they have threatened communities with burning their villages unless their young people are made to serve.
Questions remain over the military's effectiveness, especially in remote areas, but human rights groups say their rule remains brutal.
The human rights situation in Myanmar has morphed into a never-ending nightmare, away from the spotlight of global politics.
Since its independence in 1948, the country, formerly known as Burma, has experienced decades of military rule, civil unrest, and ethnic conflict. Since its latest coup in 2021, when the military seized power and detained the state councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, there has been brutal violence against human rights defenders, civil society groups, and journalists to silence potential protests and dissent. But in the last 3 years, multiple rebel armies have emerged in all corners of the country. More than 4,000 people have been killed and almost 26,000 arrested. Despite brief moments of democratic progress in the country, the military continues to rule, but its dominance has never been tested on so many fronts as it is now.
So can the military continue its reign in part through conscription, or will that rebellion and unrest force change on its leadership? Well, joining me now to debate that and more are from Bangkok, Nyo Ohn Myint, a former member of the National League for Democracy, an assistant of Aung San Suu Kyi. He's also the former director of President U Thein Sein's Myanmar Peace Center. Aung Kyaw Moe is the Deputy Human Rights Minister of Myanmar's exiled National Unity Government and a Rohingya activist. And also from the Thai capital is Matthew Smith, the co-founder and CEO of Fortify Rights. Now, we also reached out to Myanmar's military for their participation in this program, but they unfortunately declined our invitation. Matthew Smith, let me begin with you, because you are an observer here. How much do you think we can actually read into this forced conscription, first of all? Is it an act of desperation because the military is under pressure, or just par for the course for their leadership?
Well, in a way, I think it's both, Andrea. It's certainly an act of desperation. The military, since the coup, has experienced unprecedented defections. We don't really have a precise figure, but it's a highly considerable number. And they've also experienced a lot of battlefield defeats, particularly in the last year. So I think there's quite a lot of pressure. When you add on top of that sanctions and other measures that governments around the world have taken, the military is losing, and they're under pressure. And so we do interpret this as an act of desperation.
But will conscripts, or would conscripts equal effective fighters that they need, especially in the many parts of the country that they're now losing their own territory?
Well, yeah, that's just it. I don't think so, not at all. And we know that the junta has already activated its henchmen to go and try to forcibly recruit people. We know it's happening in Rakhine State. We know it's happening in other parts of the country. And people are in hiding. People are worried. This will certainly create more refugee outflows as well. So this is something that Myanmar's neighbors also should be pressuring the military junta to stop. But will this produce a stronger Myanmar military? Absolutely not.
Nyo Ohn Myint, what's your take
Yes.
on the move to reenact, by the way, that 2012 law to force conscription on civilians?
I think every country has it, the national service. Like in United States, when our very famous the boxer Muhammad Ali even tried to avoid in the Vietnam War. So of course, in our country is under very much fighting. It's the most of the ethnics, and then also the NUG under the NUG, the People Defense Forces is attacking in the villages, towns, and you name it. So that's true. And then, but that's going to be a make-up story. A lot of rumors that created more panic than reality. I was in Yangon 3-4 days ago, and then there was nothing. And I was in and because of course I understand. I used to be the revolutionist and political anti-government political activist. So I feel that how people are worried about that. But when you look at it, this is not a force. This is a voluntary basis.
It is, because that is not what the understanding seems to be at all, especially from the outside. This is why they're calling it forced conscription. And we're even hearing that Rohingya people will be expected to join when the very regime they're supposed to be fighting for has been accused of genocide of their own people.
I think, I'm sorry to interrupt that thing that, when I look at the news from the Myanmar military, the SAC, the Administrative Council, they already clearly messaged to the Rohingya people that if you are not a citizen, we cannot recruit. This is constitutions. So, and then also there was so many rumors, but I don't see that any solid proof that Rohingya people are being targeted by the Myanmar military government, and to make that, being a soldier, sending to the front line and fighting with the AA. That actually the Myanmar, I think majority, they're worried right now that the communal violence in the Rakhine State, that's the Myanmar military concern.
Okay. Aung Kyaw Moe, do you see this as Nyo does, in that this is what governments have to do, just like the United States had to do it when they entered into conflict? Or is this an act of desperation, as Matthew was more signaling, for the military, as it is losing, arguably, I should say, the fight in many areas of the country where rebel groups have stepped up?
Definitely, this is military of Myanmar is in active desperation that they have never faced in the history of Myanmar. And the law that has been activated is as a result of that junta is falling both from internally and externally. The force internally, that the way that they're falling is there are defections, and there are the chain of command systems within the military is not functioning to the level it is designed to be. On the other hand, of course, the national unity government's work across the democratization process, the ethnic resistance organizations coming together in a coordinated way to defeat the junta is very, very high in accelerated. And this they have never faced. So, of course, despite the equipment that they might have and they are being able to source from their allies, the human resource is a big component of any wars. And if you are missing that very human resource, you are losing. And any battlefield that they go and confront with ethnic resistance organizations or democratic force, unless or even they use airstrike, they lose. They're losing, dying. The military of Myanmar, their forces on the ground, battalions are fighting not because they believe in the defense that they are set out there to be doing, because they had to follow the order that's being given. Whether you die or not, we don't care. We have to maintain our wealth and power. That's the primary interest. And of course, this is very, very concerning for those who are serving for the military of Myanmar. And the generals does not care about the lives of the subordinate that they are under their chain of command.
Right.
So that.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
again, the question of what kind of fighters will reluctant conscripts even be? But Matthew, let me come back to you, because by most measurements, Myanmar, it may be failing, but will it actually reach the point where this downward trajectory would actually end the military junta's rule? Because some say that's just too optimistic.
Well, a couple points. I mean, I've been, obviously I'm not from Myanmar. I've been working on human rights in Myanmar and living in Southeast Asia since 2005. This is the first time that I've ever heard anybody have a reasonable conversation about the fall of the Myanmar military. Before the coup and before these massive battlefield losses that these victories that the revolutionary forces have had over Myanmar military forces in recent years, before that, it would have been unthinkable to talk about the fall of the Myanmar military. So I do think it is trending and moving in that direction. Now is the right time to be talking about the state of Myanmar post military regime. And if I may just respond to Nyo Ohn Myint, I think this is not a situation that is comparable to conscription in the 1960s in the United States. The military is a criminal regime. This is, if the Myanmar military were a national army representing a sovereign state, it would be lawful for it to conscript forces. But that's not what the military is. It's an illegal, illegitimate regime. It's a criminal regime that's responsible for war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity. And so this is not really a conscription law. It's more akin to forced labor, and in some jurisdictions would actually be considered human trafficking. And so it is deeply problematic on that level. Okay.
So, Nyo, let me ask you,
yes.
For those who support the military in Myanmar, what do they see as the benefits? Do they join the military, or would they support conscription because they believe the military holds the country together and there is a sense of patriotism here, even if they have to do it by force or forced labor, as Matthew might put it?
I think that's two things. Our country was at the very diverse ethnic, situation, and then but most of that, I'm very closely watching the Myanmar situation, and then I see that it's so many the conflicts. It's based on the proxy war. If I say that, I have we got a few proof that in 1027, like in October 10th. So, October 27th, October 10th. So then, the situation in that the northern front, it was like, tremendous the third party or the military has been, the shock by the ethnic armed forces. We're also shocked that what is going on, and then and the southern, of course. So you see that there's so many mercenaries, so many volunteers is fighting. So my job is a peace, and I'm not supporting either military or the EAOs to kill the unarmed civilians. This is my stand where I am. So I'm not a human rights advocator, but when people see that the Myanmar cannot be collapsed because they are worried about the situation, their lands, their home, especially like 70% of the population in a rural area, they also suffer by both sides. So the people of Myanmar wanted to end the armed conflict and then fighting against each other because we kill each other. We're like kind of we are Myanmar. We are like even Kachin, Shan, you name it. So we are losing a war from both sides.
Aung Kyaw Moe, does that make sense to you, that there seems to be no good guys on any side of the equation, according to Nyo?
I respectfully have to disagree. It's not that we are fighting with each other. We are fighting with a criminal gangs, as Matthew has mentioned, that has committed war crimes, crimes against genocide, crimes against humanity, and genocides against its own people. And the people of Myanmar want to end, not the conflict alone. It's want to end, first and foremost, the dictatorship that has been long-standing, absorbing its resources of the country, and it has been enjoying long cycle of impunity over the crimes they have been committing to the ethnic people, to Burmese people, its own Burma people. And so that's what Burmese people first and foremost want to end rather than conflict itself. And the people in Myanmar is fighting with their own cost. We have little to no international support. 50 million plus people versus a few hundred thousands of militaries who has weapons and who confiscated military infrastructure of Myanmar. So with little to no international support, to be determined, to be continuing 3+ years to defeat this strong military, come with courage, wills, and sacrifice. And we are winning, and we will win. We will end this dictatorship for once and for all, create inclusive federal democracy for everyone in Myanmar who will enjoy prosperity, security, and dignity and equality.
Nyo, why do you think that's just a fantasy?
I think that's not a reality in Southeast Asia, in Thailand, the Indonesia, you name it, in ASEAN. And then we're like even ASEAN, it was a different kind of the institutions and the political situations. Yeah, of course, that's a very sweet word about the human rights and then, democracy. But, I'm really, for example, we are in the middle of that, both sides. And, we are afraid of the Myanmar military if we, again, said saying something wrong, and then we're going to get arrested. At the same time, they put it in that he is a spy, informer, he was against the revolution. This is not a democracy seeking. They are armed struggling, and then they are fighting, and not only a battle. Every day, the civilians administrator, government, the administrator have been gunned down because they call that they are fair because you serve that teachers, that the religious person has been gunned down every day. This is not a right to say that this is creating a democracy. It's creating the warlords.
Let me ask Matthew about that. I mean, we're hearing one side that seems to be quite optimistic, the other seems to be quite cynical, and we're talking about the same place here. But is there some truth to the issue that I'll repeat it again, there might not be good guys necessarily on any side, and that warlords are being created in this fight to take down a military dictatorship?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest warlord in the country is Senior General Nyo Ohn Myint, and he should be held accountable for the atrocity crimes that he's responsible for. Certainly, there have been human rights violations committed by revolutionary forces. Our team at Fortify Rights has documented some of those situations. But to suggest that there is some sort of equivalency between the atrocities being committed by the Myanmar military junta and human rights violations that have been perpetrated by revolutionary forces is just farcical. It's a false equivalency. And I think, you can't be neutral on a moving train. And this is a situation in which there's no room for these false equivalencies. The Myanmar military, as Aung Kyaw Moe said very clearly, is a criminal regime. They took power by force. They've been imprisoning tens of thousands of people, and even before the coup, they were responsible for decades of atrocities, including genocide, the crime of crimes. So, yeah, I do think that a bit more attention should certainly be given to the Myanmar military's role in this really horrific situation that's unfolding.
Okay, we're down to our last 5 minutes. So, Matthew, I'll stick with you quickly because I'd like to move on to this mention. I don't want to say it was a formal statement made, but this mention of holding an election sometime in 2025, from what we're hearing from Myanmar's military leaders. What does that mean in this context right now? They're already saying they wouldn't be able to even include a number of regions in the country because of the civil conflict. So what is this setting up for?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's going to lead to more bloodshed. Certainly, I think also this is a situation which the senior generals, what they're banking on, is that they will give the appearance of democratic progress, with hopes that the international community will slowly come around to engaging them and working with them and treating them as legitimate political leaders in the country. That's what they're hoping for. I don't personally believe that the people of Myanmar will tolerate an election, certainly not in a year. And again, I do think it will lead to an uptick in bloodshed, unfortunately.
Okay, Nyo, are you on the same page there? I mean, is this an exercise to try and convince the international community that progress is being made? It would tick a box, many argue as well, for ASEAN. What do you make of the talk of an election?
Well, I think how could we find it the exits, the solution? We have no solutions of fighting, and no one wins. And then there's going to be another chance to have it like another political landscape. Why we wanted to blame each other? Yeah, of course. We're Myanmar. We suffer in that our country. So we need to see there's some changes. We need to see the reconciliation. We need to see that stability, because the more the sanction come, millions of people suffer. But I'm not really sure that the sanction works. No, it was like since 1988 there was so many sanctions. Sometimes we are supporting the sanctions, sometimes we oppose the sanctions, because when one sanction hit that the HIV patients, they didn't get any efficient the medical supplies, so we opposed it about that situation. So the sanction and the pressure is not working for the Myanmar, it literally. So I think maybe like some.
Okay, and would an election help solve that?
Somewhat. You never know. In 2010, there was an election. People very negative, but it came out with a very positive in the U Thein Sein period.
Okay, Aung Kyaw Moe, your thoughts there?
The junta think the exit lane from the catastrophe that they have created over this country is the sham election. And I think it is unrealistic fantasy that did not happen for the past 3 years that the junta has been trying. Even what percentage of the total territory do they control to hold these elections? And we did have an election that had landslide party winning, and we did have a parliament being elected mandated, which has legitimacy and legality, and that's functioning in both, not in exile, as I think earlier that you mentioned, most of its members as well still remain in the country, and the government, the National Unity Government's member, who were also elected member of parliament in 2020, also majority of them are in country where they're partially they're exiled. And one last thing I would like to highlight here when it's come to the Rohingya, I would have to respectfully mention that the amount of disinformation and misinformation propaganda that the junta has been using over the Rohingya is absolutely not surprising to us. And we have got and verified, and I am originally from Rakhine State, and I have daily connections with the people who are even being trained. And the first video that went viral came to me first from the training. It is not an artificially created fake video. It is a human
training with the Arakan army or another group?
The conscriptions, the Myanmar military forcefully recruiting and using Rohingya as human shield to continue their unfinished business of genocides against Rohingya people is going on, and we have collected all the evidence to be utilized both in the policy making setting and accountability mechanism that's going around the international setting, and as well as for our transitional justice proposal in near future.
Aung, that will have to be the final word. Very unfortunately, we're completely out of time for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us. And our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on X, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sanke. We'll see you next time.